How can a Buddhist tribe hidden in the Himalayas carry the blood of ancient Persian warriors? Not metaphorically, but literally, genetically. This is Ladakh, a land of ice and silence. High above sea level, where prayer flags whip in the wind and monasteries glow with butter lamplight. At first glance you'd say it's purely Tibetan, spiritually, culturally, visibly. But inside the bloodstreams of its people lies a different story, a much older story. When scientists ran DNA tests on Ladakhi males, they didn't just find Tibetan or East Asian roots. They discovered a cluster of Y chromosome haplogroups, with origins thousands of kilometers away, in the ancient Iranian world. One study in particular by Rowold et al. 2016 revealed something astonishing. Among Ladakhi men, haplogroups R1a and 22%, J1 07%, L and Q 20% were present in significant numbers. These aren't native to the Himalayas, they are the genetic signatures of Indo-Iranian migrants, of Persian-linked populations, of men who once walked the deserts of Central Asia, the valleys of Iran, the corridors of Achaemenid Persia. R1a is especially critical here. Often dubbed the Aryan marker, it stretches from Eastern Europe to Iran to India, and now deep into Ladakh. But here's where it gets even stranger. Haplogroup Q, which originated in Siberia and Central Asia over 15,000 years ago, appears in Ladakh with a calculated TMR-CA time to most recent common ancestor of approximately 11,000 years ago. That suggests an extremely ancient westward migration, long before Silk Roads, long before empires. Then there's J1, typically found across the Near East, Arabia and Persia, showing up in the genes of Ladakhi men. A lineage shared with Iranians and Central Asians now hidden beneath monk robes and mountain dust. How did this Persian legacy reach a land with no known Persian temples, no Zoroastrian relics, no Iranian artifacts? The answer isn't in books or ruins, it's in the blood, and if these ancient genes live on in Ladakis today, then who were the first Persians to cross into these mountains? And what did they leave behind besides their DNA? The answer doesn't come from ruins, it comes from living people. From a tribe so isolated, so unique, their very existence challenges everything we thought we knew about the Indo-Iranian story. They are the Brokpa, and their blood speaks louder than any manuscript. Located in the Aryan Valley of western Ladakh, places like Dar, Hanu and Garkon, the Brokpas don't look Tibetan. They don't speak Tibetan. Their dialect is Brokskat, a Dardic language that traces its roots to Proto-Indo-Iranian, spoken over 4,000 years ago on the Central Asian steppe. But this isn't just about language, it's about blood. In 2023, a new genetic study on mitochondrial DNA, which traces maternal ancestry, revealed a startling truth. The Brokpas carry haplogroups M, 30, H, and U. These maternal lineages are not Himalayan, they're West Eurasian, Neolithic Iranian, thousands of years older than Ladakh's Buddhist history. One specific lineage, haplogroup U7, is especially rare, found mostly in Iran, the Caucasus, and Balochistan. And yet, here it is in women who grow barley on the cliffs of Ladakh. This means women, not just men, from the Iranian plateau settled here, possibly over 8,000 years ago, long before the first Tibetans stepped into this land. But the Brokpa's mystery goes deeper. According to the Ladakh District Gazetteer, the Ladakhi people claim descent from a tri-racial ancestry: Mons of India, Mongols of Central Asia, and Dards of Iranian origin. That final word matters: Iranian, not just Indo-Aryan. And Herodotus knew them. In the 5th century BCE, he wrote about the Ladakhi, fierce mountain tribes on the eastern edge of the Persian Empire. The name aligns perfectly with the Dards, whose homeland, Dardistan, overlaps modern Ladakh. Even Persian imperial records from the Achaemenid era mention a satrapy called Ladakhi, likely referring to this region, which means this remote valley may once have been known, feared, taxed by Persia itself. These aren't just rumours. The Brokpas are not a myth. They are the oldest surviving witnesses of a forgotten migration. Indo-Iranians who stayed, survived and carved a new identity at the edge of the world. But if they never left, did they leave behind a trail carved in a language that no one has spoken for centuries? They did, and not just one. Across the cliffs of Tangsi, between the snow-fed streams and ancient trade routes, lie messages, not whispers, no echoes, actual names carved in stone in Sogdian, yes, Sogdian. The language was once spoken in the Persian cities of Samarkand and Panjikent, a language of fire temples and silk traders, found here in Ladakh on a boulder. The script was first discovered by French scholar Nicholas Sims Williams, who confirmed that the Tangsa Gorge inscriptions, written in mid-8th century CE, were in fact Sogdian and Arabic, carved by hands from the far west. This isn't a symbolic influence, this is physical presence. Traders, messengers, pilgrims, Persians and Central Asians leaving their real names behind. One inscription reads, Prahita, son of the caravan chief. May Ahura Mazda protect him. That's not just trade, that's religion. That's Zoroastrianism in the Himalayas. And here's the twist, this wasn't rare. The Silk Road wasn't just a network of camel tracks, it was a living bloodstream. And Ladakh, sitting at the edge of Central Asia and India, was one of its secret arteries. The Silk Road carried more than silk, it carried genes. Because when Persian and Sogdian traders crossed into these valleys, some of them didn't leave. They married, they stayed. Their blood merged with locals, blending Central Asian-wide DNA, haplogroups like J1 and R1b into Ladakhi gene pools. It wasn't just economic exchange, it was biological integration. By the 19th century, Les Bazaar had become a polyglot hub, as recorded in Penn Museum travel logs, where Persian, Turkic, Tibetan and Indian tongues mixed over tea and trade, a living museum of the Persian diaspora. But this was just the caravan class. These were only the merchants. What happens when the empires themselves begin to move? When Persian imperial power doesn't just pass through Ladakh, but stamps itself into its soil? It doesn't leave. It lingers, in blood, in stone, in silence. And the empire that did this wasn't Persian by name, but Persian in soul, the Kushan Empire. They ruled from the 1st to 3rd century CE, from Afghanistan to central India, across Gandhara, Kashmir, and into Ladakh. A forgotten superpower that spoke Bactrian, an Eastern Iranian tongue. A language rooted in the same soil as Persian, a language once written in Greek script, spoken by kings who carved gods into coins. Now imagine those coins, gold, heavy, glinting with power, crossing mountain passes into Ladakh. Some of those coins show Mithra, the Persian god of light. Others show Oesho, the Kushan form of Shiva, with Iranian royal fire altars beside him. Persian gods beside Indian ones, in the same hand, in the same valley, but it wasn't just religion, it was style, fusion. Article The Kushans blended Greco-Bactrian elegance with Scythian ruggedness and Iranian symbolism. And when they spread Buddhism through the Karakoram into Ladakh, they didn't bring it alone. They brought an artistic language carved from Persian influence. And this is where it gets strange. In Alchi Monastery, Far from the ancient Kushan heartland, murals still breathe that Kushan spirit, with motifs that mirror Persian silk designs, Bactrian dress codes, and celestial banquet scenes with Iranian flair. So the question is not whether Persian ideas reached Ladakh, it's whether the Kushan Empire embedded Persian DNA into the very structure of Ladakhi culture. Quietly, permanently, invisibly. Because if the Kushans ruled here, and they did, their soldiers didn't just pass through, their traders stayed, their artists taught, and their genes mingled. But this is just the surface. What if Persian roots didn't stop at murals and motifs, but ran even deeper, into the sacred heart of Ladakh's most holy temples? And so we enter Al-Shi. Not as tourists, not as pilgrims, but as seekers, looking for fingerprints, not in sand or stone, but in colour, paint, pattern. Inside the Sumtsek temple, built around the late 11th or early 12th century, the walls are alive. Murals, majestic, sprawling, stretch from floor to ceiling. But then something stops you. The robes of the bodhisattvas are wrong, not in faith, but in style. Woven into their painted silks are pearl roundel patterns, circular motifs once reserved for the Sassanid elite of 5th to 7th century Persia. The same designs found on textiles in Ctesiphon, capital of the Sassanid Empire. The same emblems once worn by Persian nobles, now glowing inside a Buddhist monastery. This isn't accidental. Scholars from the Courtauld Institute trace these visual echoes from Alchi back to Persia, Central Asia, and Gandhara. Their study showed that the iconographic DNA of Alchi is hybrid, Tibetan themes layered over Iranian design memory. But the paintbrush didn't move itself. The artists, most likely Kashmiri muralists, arrived during the second Buddhist diffusion. Between the 10th and 13th centuries, Kashmir was the cultural bridge between India and Central Asia. And those artisans? They didn't just bring skill, they brought ancestry. Many were descended from Indo-Scythians, who themselves carried Iranian bloodlines. Their migration wasn't spiritual alone, it was biological. These craftsmen didn't just paint Altai, they lived there, loved there, died there. Their children married Ladakhis. So when we look at Alti's walls, we're not just seeing Persian influence, we're seeing a Persian presence, frozen in pigment, flowing in blood. But this is where it gets deeper, because if Persian identity could live in the robes of a painted deity, what happens when it enters the prayer itself? It doesn't just enter, it rewrites the prayer. The most visible Persian legacy in Ladakh today isn't in the past, it's alive, breathing, praying, voting, marrying, speaking. The Persian story isn't over. It's still walking the streets of Kargil. You see, long before DNA labs confirmed West Asian ancestry, Persian bloodlines were already flowing through Ladakh's mosques. The turning point came in the 15th century, when disciples of Sayyid Ali Hamadani, a revered Persian Sufi, crossed into Baltistan. But it wasn't just his teachings they carried, it was lineage. One of those men, Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi, would spark a transformation. His sermons didn't just echo in stone courtyards, they led to mass conversions in Kargil, Dras, and even parts of Zanskar. But here's the shocker, he and his followers intermarried. The Persian spiritual elite became part of the local gene pool. Their descendants didn't disappear into history. They became Nur-Bakshis, a Sufi sect that still preserves Persian rituals, Persian prayers, and Persian blood, and the cultural footprint. It's everywhere. Kargili surnames still carry Sayyid, Rizvi, Iraqi, inherited from these Persian ancestors. Grave markers are inscribed in elegant Persian script. Festivals include poetry and dialects rooted in ancient Iran. And power. That too. By the time of the Treaty of Temesgem in 1684, Ladakhi royalty had to honour the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, not just in diplomacy, but in Persian. The treaty was linked in the very language of their ancestors' preachers. This wasn't just a conversion. This was a bloodline migration disguised as faith. But what if these Sufis weren't the first to bring Persian belief to these peaks? What if, before Islam, there was already a fire burning carried by exiles, not missionaries? Now rewind further, before Islam, before Buddhism, back to when the Persian Empire wasn't just a memory, it was a machine, vast, ruthless, brilliant, and expanding east. That's where this twist begins, because buried in the old Achaemenid records, etched in cuneiform under the rule of Darius I around 500 BCE, is the name of a region nearly forgotten. Ladakhi, not India, not Tibet, but Ladakhi, a satrapy on the empire's eastern edge, a tribute-paying province. Many scholars now believe this may refer to Dardistan, the ancient highland homeland of the Dards, ancestors of the Brokpaz, the Shin, and other isolated Indo-Aryan tribes of Ladakh and Gilgit-Baltistan. If this is true, then long before Tibetan lamas or Muslim saints ever set foot in Ladakh, Persian kings were collecting taxes here, and the pieces begin to line up. Herodotus, the father of history, writing in the 5th century BCE, mentioned that Aryan-speaking mountain tribes were part of the Eastern Persian Empire. He called them the Ladakhi, fierce, free mountain people. Their name echoes the Dards. Now compare that with DNA. Modern Y chromosome haplogroups in Ladakh, R1A, L and J1, closely match the same genetic patterns seen today in Iran, Tajikistan and northern Afghanistan. These aren't coincidences. They're remnants, not just of contact, but of rule. That means Persian authority, Persian blood, and Persian identity were already here. While most of Europe was still tribal and fractured, Ladakh wasn't a forgotten outpost. It was already in the books, named, mapped, taxed by the greatest empire of its time. But then history changed direction. Because if the Persians once ruled this land, the next question is terrifying. Who came after? And why do their bones still lie under Ladakhi soil? They didn't ride in with flags. They didn't build empires. They arrived like storms, waves of them, roaring from the steppes, the Scythians, the Sakas, and later, the Hephthalite Huns, nomads, warriors, ghosts. Between the 2nd century BCE and the 6th century CE, Ladakh became more than a borderland. It became a collision zone, the very ridge between order and chaos. But here's the twist. These were not foreign raiders in the modern sense. They were Iranian cousins. The Scythians and Sakas spoke Iranian dialects, worshipped sky gods, buried their dead facing the sun. Their rituals burned with fire cults, much like Zoroastrianism, and genetically, they brought haplogroups Q and R1b. These markers still appear in Ladakhi populations today. How did they get here? The answer lies in the arteries of the empire, Silk Road passes that carved through western Ladakh. Those paths didn't just carry silk, they carried bloodlines, each tribe, each incursion, each forgotten war, and left behind more than bones. They left customs. You can still see it in Dardic burial styles, elevated grave mounds, and traces of sky-facing cremation rites. Some Brokpa rituals echo these forgotten steppe traditions, though no one remembers where they came from. And still, the connection to Persia deepens, because the Sakas in particular once ruled parts of eastern Iran. Their fusion with local Persians blurred lines between identity and empire. So when they moved east, they didn't bring only violence. They brought memories, language, a sense of spiritual homeland rooted in Zoroastrian fire and sky cults. And they didn't only leave behind warriors, they left their families. Because Persian influence didn't just arrive on horseback, some came through mothers, and those bloodlines carry secrets that silence can't erase. Now, imagine this, not a warrior charging over a mountain pass, but a woman, quiet, unarmed, carrying no sword, no scroll, only a child on her back, and a lineage older than every empire that would come after. This is where the twist flips everything we thought we knew. Because beneath the surface of Ladakh's genetic landscape, deeper than banners, deeper than armies, scientists found Persian ancestry written in the bodies of Ladakhi women. Not just recently, not even 1,000 years ago, but thousands of years back, long before the rise of Tibetan culture, long before Islamic missionaries, before even the Kushan kings. Studies in 2023 revealed that Brokpa and Mon women, isolated ethnic groups tucked into the valleys of western Ladakh, carry maternal mitochondrial DNA haplogroups linked to West Eurasia, specifically M30, H and U. These are not Tibetan markers, not East Asian. They trace back to the Iranian plateau, to Neolithic West Eurasian populations, and perhaps even further, to the Indo-Iranian expansions over 3,500 years ago. But here's the most haunting part. These women didn't come through war. They came through migration, through settlement. Maybe as traders' wives, maybe as religious pilgrims, maybe as mothers seeking survival. Their passage was slow, organic, and permanent, and over generations their genes didn't fade. They spread, they mixed, they formed the silent backbone of Ladakhi ancestry. This isn't the story of kings, it's the story of milk givers, of lullabies sung in forgotten dialects, of rituals passed from grandmother to granddaughter, never written down, but imprinted into the blood. It's a maternal memory, echoed not in history books, but in bone, birth, and blood. But beyond genes, even the rocks whisper these secrets, symbols no one could read. Until now. Now imagine standing in front of a stone, not just any stone, but one etched over 1,000 years ago. And it's speaking, not in Tibetan, not in Sanskrit, but in Sogdian, a language born in Samarkand, spoken by traders who crossed deserts, mountains and frozen rivers, all to reach Ladakh. And here, in the wind-scoured gorge of Tangtse, those words still remain. One inscription, dated to the mid-8th century CE, is a prayer, written by a Sogdian merchant, possibly on his final journey through the Himalayas. It's not just a message, it's a memory, a plea carved in stone, asking for protection, for safe passage, for something more permanent than his own life. And Tangtse is just the beginning. In Kaltse da Nimu Karzok, stones are littered with scripts from across empires, Tocharian, Arabic, Brahmi, Kharosti. Some are devotional, some are records of transactions, others undeciphered. Like lost languages frozen in granite, each one is a footprint, proof that Ladakh wasn't a silent valley waiting to be discovered. It was a crossroads, a place where Persians, Central Asians, Indian pilgrims, Arab merchants, and Chinese monks all paused and left a mark, a name, a word, a hope. And archaeologists now believe these petroglyphs, once thought to be random carvings, were part of ritual travel routes, spiritual staging posts, and even early border declarations. They tell us something genetic evidence can't. These people didn't just pass through, they connected, they spoke, They carved their stories into Ladakh skin. So when you look at a rock in Ladakh, you're not looking at silence. You're looking at a multilingual diary of 2,000 years of movement. But in all this convergence, all these prayers and trades and treaties, one question still burns. Who really are the Ladakhis? At first glance the answer seems simple. You look at their faces, their robes, the rhythm of their prayers, and you see Tibet. You hear Buddhism, smell yak butter, feel the monastic silence hanging in crisp, high-altitude air. But then, the contradictions begin. A wedding song that echoes Persian maqams, a dance step straight from Central Asia's mountain tribes, a sacred fire rite held in secret, older than the monasteries themselves. And when the DNA comes in, it confirms what history forgot to write down. Ladakh is not one people. It's a living mosaic, woven from Aryan highlanders, Persian merchants, Tibetan monks, Indian queens, and Central Asian nomads. 1,000 migrations, 100 forgotten kingdoms, all leaving threads behind. Studies from 2021 and 2023 confirm that mtDNA and yDNA markers in Ladakhi populations span the map: M30, H, U, R, 1A, L, J, 1, Q. Maternal and paternal lineages tied to Neolithic Iran, Scythian steppes, and Indo-Gangetic plains. And that's just the blood. The stones too, remember. Murals in Alchi, textiles in Leh, carvings in Tangsi. They all speak a forgotten dialect. One made not of words, but of memory. So maybe identity isn't fixed. Maybe it's not a map, or a border, or a language. Maybe it's what happens when caravans don't just pass through, but stop, stay, marry, teach, die. Maybe identity is what grows in places like Ladakh, where civilizations don't erase each other, they layer, like sediment, like soil. And what you see today, in the eyes of a child herding goats across a frozen pass, is not just the future, it's everyone who came before. Every forgotten queen, every whispered prayer, every Persian, Indian, Tibetan and Scythian who ever called these valleys home. So when you walk through Ladakh, whose stories are you really walking through? Subscribe for more untold DNA journeys through forgotten civilizations, because some bloodlines whisper louder than history.